Hi, this is Hart Hagen with Let's Talk, and I'm here with my regular guest and cohort and partner, Rolf Friss. Rolf, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. How's everybody out there?
So we're airing on 106.5 FM Forward Radio, Louisville, also on YouTube and SoundCloud. So today we're going to talk about topics like net neutrality. Rolf is going to talk to us about net neutrality. I have some responses to the net neutrality thing related to technology, but don't get me started on technology and where it comes from and who controls it and who funds it and pays for it, et cetera. We're also going to talk a little bit about May Day, and we've got some viewer mail about somebody who's talking about, the presidential race and Joe Biden, et cetera. Rolf has a few thoughts on the word progressive and how the word progressive is changing. And I think also, Rolf, we ought to not hesitate to talk about like our Hall of Fame of podcaster heroes. I think our listeners deserve to know who are the best of the best out there. Well, why don't we start with that? So can we talk about who we like in the podcaster realm?
Podcasters. So different from YouTube?
I'm talking about including YouTube, like Jimmy
Oh,
Dore,
okay.
Lee
I'm
Camp,
not a
et
big
cetera.
like specific podcast listener, but I do, I listen to a ton of YouTube people. So,
Right, that's what I'm
uh, all
talking
right,
about.
just making sure. I mean, we've talked about Jimmy and Lee Camp. Those are obvious. There's so many good ones. There's more good ones than we could talk about, and more than I have time to watch. But Tim Black is an excellent follow. He's on Facebook. He's on YouTube. I believe he's on Twitter. I'm not sure about that one. This guy, he's been around since 2014, 2015, somewhere around there. Has been extremely consistent with his show. Definitely watch that. He puts on a late night live show that's later than everybody else, and that's a good one. So Tim Black, there's the MCSC network, which is excellent. It's got multiple people on it. That
Nico
has been,
House.
yeah, that was started by Nico House, who's an excellent progressive. The Convo Couch is on there, which is an amazing show. Fiorella Isabel and Pasta, Craig Jardula. They are the underground, on the ground people. They go all over the country. They talk to all the activists. They do great analysis. So I would highly recommend MCSC. Another
Well, let
good
me
one.
let me ask you. I've got some others in mind too, but first I
Mhm.
want to let's talk about. I mean, why we like Jimmy Dore, and maybe why some people don't like Jimmy Dore. But I mean, I like him. I like him because he cusses and calls names, and because he's damn near always right about things. At least his views align with mine. I mean, right now I don't have much time for Bernie Sanders right now. I just don't. I love him and I
Either.
was following him. I just think right now he's useless as you know what,
Hmm.
because it's all talk. I think AOC right now is all talk and no action. I think they forgot. They don't act like they have any power.
They gave it
And
away, so there's no
yeah,
point
they
for them
gave
to.
their power away.
Yeah, once they gave their power away, good people. I hope they continue to do work and come join us in the movement. But you know, they're not the ones to lead right now.
Right. And Jimmy Dore is talking about that consistently. He just
Hmm.
cuts them no slack, and I don't think he should. And if it weren't for Jimmy Dore, I'm not sure if my views would be where they are right now. So, and plus, Jimmy Dore is he's funny, and yeah, he's just real funny and entertaining. Now, there was a time like 3 or 4 weeks ago when I I kind of he was being a little bit too intense for me. And I would kind of turn him off because it's like, Jimmy, I'm upset too, but you need to lighten up just a little.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
gonna
he
blow
gets
it.
that way.
You're gonna blow a gasket. And he especially does that when he talks to Dylan Radigan. You seen
Hmm.
Dylan Radigan? So Dylan
Yes.
Radigan in my world is the person who tells me Dylan Radigan and Matt Taibbi are the two people that give me the lowdown on what's really happening with the financial markets and the economy. They're the ones
Mhm.
that know what's going on.
Yes.
And so I get Dylan Radigan from Jimmy Dore, I don't see him any other place.
Mm-mm.
So
Yeah, Jimmy gets all the guests that nobody else gets. A lot of these progressives that have been elected, the first place they came on was Jimmy's show. And that's how people got to know him. Like AOC was one. And, she kind of stabbed him in the back by not, he's reached out to her several times to come back on and she hasn't done it. But point is,
Bernie would never go on his show either. But go
no,
ahead.
he doesn't do independent media anyways, which is one of the problems. Even at my biggest Bernie moments, he would not touch independent media. Is frustrating. He did do Joe Rogan. He went on there for an hour, and of course, Rogan
He
is
went
the
on
biggest
Kyle
podcast in
Kalinske
America.
for
Yeah,
15 minutes. Yeah.
yeah, and that's it. So, he when I reached out to him when he came here, they totally ghosted me. The campaign didn't even respond to me. So, it's one thing to say, hey, we're not messing with independent media, but they saw wasn't, the local 4-letter network and just didn't even think I was worthy to say no to, much less, actually say yes to. So that was really disappointing. Of the candidates, really, Tulsi was the only one who would go on independent media. And that was one thing that I liked about her over Bernie was she, for example, she went to California and then one day she did 4 or 5 independent shows, like the Convo Couch. She did Jimmy Dore. She even did one show, some real small show I'd never heard of. So that was amazing. There's obviously there ended up being some issues with her campaign, but that was something that I really liked that she did was reach out to independent media. So had we had a primary here, I was going to I was trying to get Tulsi on the show. If she came here, I've reached out to some Green Party candidates. I reached out to Mark Charles, who's running independent, and I would reach out to Bernie again and try, but he, no love for independent. But anyways, we're getting off track here.
Well, I want to get off track even more. So,
Okay.
so I got pinged by a libertarian the other day on the Green Party Facebook group, and they were reaching out to me, and I'm thinking, I think I would like to talk to libertarians, and not. It's tempting to think, oh, if I got in that situation, I would just want to, change their mind. But they are anti-establishment also. And so I think that, if they're tired of the two-party duopoly, if they're tired of money in politics, then we have a lot to talk about. Just saying. And
Yes,
another person that, to change the subject yet again, like Bernie interviewed with Crystal Ball. That's another independent media that he did interview with that I saw. In fact, she did that. They did that in Louisville. So Crystal Ball has from Kentucky. They have a real good show. Have you seen the show? You may or may not like the show.
The Rise.
I'm
I'm
lukewarm
a
about
daily
the show.
watcher.
Yeah. I like it pretty well. So anyway, so another independent media person that we both like is Lee Camp, and he's just freaking hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I think, is he a comedian with political content, or is he a teacher of politics who uses humor to get his point across?
I think he's all the above.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of our best. He and Jimmy really carry the torch.
Mm-hmm. Lee Camp is really strong on a lot of things, but including like election fraud, election rigging. He knows a lot about it, and he's strong on the military-industrial complex, et cetera.
Foreign policy, yeah, definitely.
So anyway, we were going to start. Other than that, we were going to start with net neutrality. So I'm going to sit back and put on my smoking jacket and light up a smoke. Not really, but I want to be taught about net neutrality. So what is this topic? Why is it important? What would you like to see happen? What are some of the things that have happened in recent years with it, et cetera?
Okay, so for me, the bedrock of all our activism needs to be in voting rights and net neutrality. If we can hold those down and get those guaranteed, then we have a chance at getting everything else. But without that, it's a major uphill battle. So net neutrality, this is something that really it first came in the news around 2013. What it is when you're on the internet, and this isn't any one specific site related, this is the internet as a whole. It's on the internet that you can type in website A or website B, and have equal access to both at the same speed. So, for example, if you're like us, a news person, and you get up and you want to, what's going on in the news today, and you type into your search bar for news, what's most likely to come up in your search results? Well, it's probably going to be, New York Times, CNN, something like that. It's probably not going to be the Louisville Proactivist Report or Hart Hagen. More than likely, that's not what you're going to see on the first page, because these are bigger outlets. Net neutrality guarantees that if I want to look at the Hart Hagen show, I can go to that website and get there with no problem. Same speed as if I want to get to the CNN on the same subject. If CNN has an article on net neutrality and Hart Hagen has an article on net neutrality, they both come up on that search. There's no favorites. Basically, it's an even playing field for the internet. And this is done by the ISPs, your internet service providers. That's your AT&T, your Comcast, your Spectrum, your Verizon, etc. Whatever you have locally. Spectrum and AT&T for us. But what net neutrality is, it's always been around since the beginning of the internet, but it wasn't a law. Well, it was made a law. And that guarantees that the speed for each side is the same. So there are no slow lanes, no fast lanes. Everybody's in the fast lane. Well, it came under attack under Obama, and Tom Wheeler, who was then the head of the FCC. And what they wanted to do was get rid of net neutrality. Well, we actually had a mainstream ally for once in John Oliver, did a segment on net neutrality. It caught fire. Everybody contacted the FCC, and we literally crashed their website, brought it down. At that point, the administration realized this is an overwhelming thing. We can't do this. We can't be these villains, because lo and behold, it has an 83% approval rating across the board. The lowest approval rating that it has is with Republicans, and that's at 80%. So of the 17 that don't approve, that's, your one percenters. And the only people really that I've met that are against this tend to be some libertarian types. I don't know why that is. It really seems like, it's a libertarian issue.
I can speculate about that.
Okay.
Because there's, just briefly, there's something called the corporate libertarianism, which is like freedom for corporations. Like libertarianism includes freedom for corporations. It's like, libertarianism follows the money. Whoever has enough money to buy more access gets it. Instead of, libertarians, there are lots of different types of libertarianism, I'm sure, but typically they fear government interference and government meddling. So that's as close as I can get to why some professed libertarians would be against net neutrality.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So yeah, we can go with that. So let's see, where was I? So
well, why is net neutrality important to you?
So the only way the populace can make informed decisions and be informed in general is to have access to good information. Well, we talked about this in previous shows about the state of our legacy media right now, how bad it is, how the 2012 Modernization Smith-Mundt Act made propaganda legal in this country against the citizenry. So at this point, we know, let me back up, not to mention, how homogenous the news is from the 1996 Telecom Act to give us just 5-6 owners of these outlets. So we only get a very limited scope on what we see. And so we're not getting good news. We can't vote on candidates with knowledge by just following these sources. We can't understand all the different issues that are going on in society by following these sources. They don't even talk about most of the things that we need to know about anymore. And I would say that cable news,
right. I absolutely agree with that. They don't talk about most of the things that we need to know about, but go ahead.
And as far as I can tell, from the 3 cable networks, there are not one journalist between the 3. I don't know if there is one. I apologize. I don't know who you are, or what article they're having you put up at 3 a.m. on the website on a Wednesday, because I haven't seen any kind of journalism. These are just intelligence agency people. These are lobbyist type people. These are former establishment politicians. These aren't people we can trust. These aren't people outside of that little bubble that they're in. Even if we could trust them and they were honest, they're still in a very small bubble. So they don't really know anything outside of their bubble.
So
So
how
there's
does
no
that
reason.
relate to net neutrality?
So net neutrality means we can go away from these people. We don't have to deal with these people. For me, I've never dealt with these people. If I know about something on CNN or Fox or MSNBC, it's because somebody sent me a link, or I saw it in somebody's show that I watched. They did a reaction to a segment or something like that. But otherwise, I don't follow this stuff at all. I go straight to the internet. Now, that doesn't mean that every source on the internet is a quality source, but that's on each person to learn how to discover these things, and that's something that comes over time. But the internet gives us actual access to information. So 200 years ago, the internet would just be a library. You go to a library, you have all these books, and you can read any book that you want. But now we have the digital age. Even when you go to the library, you don't really see too many books in the library. It's just computer stations. So we need this for information. Now, with net neutrality, it's been repealed, but it hasn't officially, because there are so many different lawsuits going on across the country that they haven't been able to enact this yet for the most part. Now, we saw one really bad example during the California wildfires, where the fire department was out fighting these fires. And because of net neutrality, they basically reached a limit on their data that they could use while they were out fighting these fires. So their company, and I want to say it's Comcast in California. I'm not 100% on that. I'm pretty, but I think it's Comcast, slowed them. They put them in the slow lane once they reached their data max. So these are people on the front lines fighting fires, saving communities, saving people, saving people's businesses, properties, etc. And you just cut their mode of communication and information. So you put people's, firefighters' lives in danger on top of everything else. So that's just unacceptable. So it does bring a safety issue. We live in Louisville. We could have an earthquake. We could have a flood. It's happened before here. We could have a major flood. And then we have our fire department and everybody else working to save people in the flood. And lo and behold, they reached their data cap, and now they can't communicate anymore. And now people's lives are in danger. Maybe a family in a house drowns that wouldn't have drowned because of that communication. We don't know, but we can't afford to risk that. So
Convince me that's an important issue. It seems to be like getting in the weeds, but
net neutrality, or in general, or just the safety issue part of that? What do you mean?
well, you're giving me an example about how people's cell phones were slowed down. When I think of net neutrality, I think you see this differently, and you're more informed than I am, but I think of, Facebook's algorithm censoring people and YouTube's algorithm censoring people, etc. So,
okay, that's so that while that takes place on the net, that's not actually net neutrality. So net neutrality, getting rid of that, is a form of censorship. But all forms of censorship on the internet are not necessarily net neutrality. You can have censorship on the internet that is not net neutrality based. So net neutrality has to do with, and I'll come back to the Facebook thing here in just a moment, but I want to give another example. It has to do with what's directly coming from your ISP, your internet service provider. So, whether you log on to Facebook at the same speed versus a small site like a MeWe or Gab or whatever these other sites are, I don't even know what they are. There's no favoritism when you log on. So what would a country look like without net neutrality if this actually goes through? Well, we have an example we can look at, and that's Portugal. And I used to live in Portugal, and I love Portugal, and I love almost everything about Portugal, except for the fact that they got rid of net neutrality. So what does their internet look like right now? If you moved to Portugal tomorrow and you called their ISP, how would it go for you? Here's what would happen. It would be like calling the cable company. So you're going to call up and you're going to say, hey, I want internet. And they're going to say, well, what do you want? Do you want a news package? Do you want a video game playing package? Do you want a sports package? an entertainment package. You know, what kind of a package do you want? Are you going to run a business through the internet? Maybe you need a business package. Instead of just saying, hey, I need the internet, and you get the internet and you pick your speed, now you have to pay for all these things. So next thing you know, if you want the full internet experience, you've got to pick like a dozen packages to get the entire internet. So that's what that does, and it's a money-making scheme. And the whole thing, getting rid of net neutrality, is a money-making scheme on multiple fronts. Not only can they charge for more packages, which of course increases your cable bill, which over here is already high for everybody, even for the basic stuff, it's really high. With the fast lane, slow lane thing, so they're going to make money off that too. So how does that work? If you have a fast lane and you say, hey, I've got this business online, I want people to come to my business, I want it to come in the search results, I want when people click on my business that the page opens immediately, then you're going to be in that fast lane. Well, that's going to cost more versus the slow lane. So if you have, say, CNN versus me, who can afford that fast lane more? CNN's got buku money. I'm just a guy, you know, who works hourly.
I heard
So
you're
it's
rolling in it.
so yeah, I wish. So for me, you know, depending on what that cost is, maybe I can't afford that. Well, it's also going to cost the customer, because now that they have packages to choose from, and then maybe they're a news junkie. Well, they don't like CNN, but they want to see the Hart Hagen show and they want to see the Louisville Proactivist report. Well, they have to pay extra because it doesn't come with their internet bill. But maybe they can't afford that. So now they miss out on the show, or maybe they can, but now they're having to pay extra just to see us instead of being forced to watch CNN or read the Washington Post or whatever it is. So that's at the end of the day, everything's about money. So that's what they want to do, is have these tiered packages to bring in more money, and these fast lanes to bring in more money on both ends of the fast lane.
Shouldn't people pay for the service they get?
We're already paying for it. We're already paying for it. We're paying for the internet now. Why do we have to break it down? It works fine. It works for all businesses. You know, if you're a small business starting up and you're scraping pennies by to make it through, you know, because so many businesses fail in the first 5 years, most of them, the vast majority of them. So if you're scraping up this money and you're trying to pay your employees and get everything started and all your equipment, now you have to come up with extra to get out of that slow lane. Because if you're in that slow lane, nobody's going to come to your site. Everybody's going to go to the fast lane sites because they load up right away. They're the ones on the first page of the search, and you don't have to worry about it. But you're not going to dig around for the local guy, pay extra to do it. So it's just more of a monopoly. It's more money in their pocket. And that's what we would see as the Portuguese model if that happens here. We do not want that. And if we lose this, net neutrality is probably not ever coming back. Like the Patriot Act was put in, we haven't gotten rid of it since, you know. So the fight is now. This is very important. It's getting rid of net neutrality is modern day book burning, and we have to stop it. We have to stop it right now. So
What's
going
to
back to
keep
your
any, like under the current, under a system that has net neutrality, what's to keep one person from putting so much data onto the internet that it shuts other people off? That's a technical question.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything like that.
Okay.
I don't even, you know, I don't even know. I haven't thought that through. Haven't really seen any examples of that, and
That's fine.
I don't worry about that too much. But I do want to address what you brought up a minute ago about Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, these algorithms. So that is a censorship. And, you know, I run my page and I look at the analytics and I can see the censorship going on, but it's not net neutrality. It's just plain old censorship. It's the people, you know, Zuckerberg for Facebook and these CEOs that run Twitter and YouTube and all these, they're in with our system. They're in with our intelligence agencies. They have it
I
in
was
with
going to say it's a private business. Like Twitter's a private business, Facebook's a private business, Google is a private business. Can't they do whatever they want?
They can. However, they are working with our government, with the intelligence agencies, with, in a lot of cases, the parties, especially the Democratic Party, more so than the Republican Party on this one.
That's because they're more evil.
Yeah, they, you know, they're both
They're equally
very
evil.
corrupt.
It's just this one is obviously evil and the other is, anyway, don't get me started.
Right. Yeah, they're both completely corrupt, but sometimes there's, you know, they get their corruptions from a little bit different direction. In this case, oddly enough, it's a higher percentage of Democratic voters that appreciate net neutrality. But you know how that goes.
Oh, yeah.
We're not represented by the parties anyways.
Yeah.
But what you see on Facebook, this is just pure censorship. This is pushing a narrative. So we have our legacy media and again, Smith-Mundt Modernization Act, making propaganda legal against the citizens. You have our intelligence agencies, our parties, our legacy media, and then Facebook, Google, which includes YouTube, Twitter, all these people working together to push a narrative. That's why now Twitter has this new thing. I heard about this yesterday. They're going to, if you have a cuss word in your tweet, or if your tweet is too similar to somebody completely separate tweet who is somewhat like yours, they're going to ask you, are you sure you want to post this? This may be inappropriate. Well, I typed it out, didn't I? So apparently that is what I want to tweet, right? I took the time to type it. So why are you double checking with me? What's going to happen if I click go ahead? So you have Facebook that just, if you post something they don't like, nobody will see it. And if they really don't like it, they'll put a little thing up over the top of covering your post saying, hey, this is probably not true. One of our fact checkers says so. Of course, their fact checkers are in line with the same group of people, and they're all pushing the same narrative, true or not. So as bad as that is, and as much as it hurts independent media, as much as it hurts the left, it's not a net neutrality issue, but it is a major, major issue. And again, that's why we need net neutrality, is we got to have some lane of proper information. We've lost legacy media. This is what we have. We need to secure it. We need to secure it now. It has to be under Title II, which makes it a utility. And beware of some fake net neutrality bills that aren't under Title II. If it's not under Title II, be against it. No matter what they say, this is it's not a compromise. It ends net neutrality. It has to be under Title II, or it's nothing, at least at the federal level. So moving on from that, what's happened recently? A couple of months ago, this went to court. It was upheld. So that's really bad news. But we were given a lifeline, and it's amazing news. So it actually is probably more positive than negative. They said that the states can do whatever they want with net neutrality. So that means now, while we don't give up on the federal level, we got to push the state level hard. And every state needs to do this. So we got to push hard. I've talked to my state senator about this. I have a meeting lined up with him. We're going to be talking about this again. I'm going to be trying to push a bill for net neutrality at the state level with him. So wish me luck. I don't know how that's going to go, but I'm going to try. We need all 50 states to do this, just to get on, guarantee net neutrality at the state level. Then it doesn't really matter. With lawsuits going on in California and New York right now, if they make that happen in those two states, they're too big. And these ISPs are not going to run two different businesses. They're not going to run net neutrality in California and New York and non-net neutrality in the rest of the country. It's too expensive for them to do the infrastructure that way. So give all your support right now to California and New York with these topics. We need that to happen. We need both of those victories, and we'll be in great shape. We need to work at the state level here, regardless, because that may fail there. So we just got to keep working here. And there's another option. We go even more local. We go to the city level, the municipal level. And this is something I've been working on as well here locally.
Talk to me about municipal broadband. Also, Ron Placone is a big advocate of this.
Yes, he's the guy. He and Mike Figueredo from the Humanist Report. Those are the two main ones. Mike was the guy. He's kind of took a step back and covered more broadly, whereas Ron has stayed on this hardcore. So I'd say he's probably the guy now. I actually stay in contact with him about this. So we have discussions about when I meet with local officials and stuff about game planning and whatnot. But he is a great resource. And if you go to Ron Placone's channel, he actually has a playlist of his net neutrality and municipal broadband. It's the best playlist on the internet for that. So check that out if you're interested in this. He's the guy. But municipal broadband, what is that? So that is net neutrality at the local level. So basically the city level. So how does that work? We as the taxpayers, the city, own the technology. So it would be our internet. We build in net neutrality into it. So from the jump, it has net neutrality. We can never lose it. It will always be there, and we'll never have to worry about it. It's a guarantee. But basically, we choose how, we build up our speed, we build up our infrastructure, and it belongs to us. So there can be no changes to it without permission from the people. So we have seen this all over the country. The biggest one is in what's called Gig City, which is Knoxville, Tennessee. They were way ahead of the curve. Yes, Tennessee people, way ahead of the curve on this. It's hard to believe, I know. But they have the fastest, cheapest internet in the country. What they get, their speed for their cost is unbelievable. Our speed in this country is slower than other first world countries, believe it or not. I don't think most people know that, but our internet speed is way slower.
Wait a minute. America is number one in everything. USA is number one. It's unacceptable to say that we're not number one. But go ahead.
True. I take it back. I take it. Everything is fine, people. There's nothing to see here. Don't worry about the man behind the curtain.
Yeah.
So yeah, our internet speed isn't like slow, but it's not as fast as it could be. It's not as fast as they play it off that it is. Gig City shows this. So now Tennessee, as a red state, is pushing hard for net neutrality and municipal broadband all over the state, and that's amazing. But we're seeing this spreading out to multiple states.
So here's a red state, and they're showing that they believe government can do some things. Mm-hmm. Red state means Republican. Typically, that means conservative. So, as a progressive, if I'm permitted to use that term.
Yes.
As a progressive, I was a conservative most of my life and a moderate the last 10 years or so. I've only been a progressive about 2 years. And I can tell you that my values didn't change. What changed was my understanding of the facts.
Right.
And not that I'm going to cram my understanding of the facts down somebody else, but it's like I'm wanting to dialogue with conservatives and libertarians and Republicans and say, can we talk about what freedom really looks like? Can we talk about this BS load of crap that we've all bought into that says government can't do anything and government's incompetent and government's the threat, when you have these big corporations that are bigger than many in terms of revenue, in terms of number of employees, they are bigger than many countries in the world. And we're talking about big, unresponsive bureaucracies. Don't tell me that Walmart gives a flying flip about you more than your local government or your state government or federal government. I mean, government is a problem only insofar as government is a puppet of big money and big corporations. You wouldn't look at a puppet and blame the puppet for the dance that it's doing because its strings are being pulled. Don't blame government. Government is, at least in theory, is accountable to the people. And the reason government is not accountable to the people is because it's being controlled by big money. Stop thinking big corporations are on your side. They're not.
Right. And you can vote if the system operates correctly, you can vote out a politician, but you cannot vote out a CEO or a board of directors. So if a corporation is doing something you don't want, all you can do is not spend your money there, which I do vote for with my dollars. And I recommend people, if a company's doing poorly and you haven't, is doing something that you don't like the way they're operating and you have another option, take your money to that other option. So yes, this municipal broadband, it's really important. I have met with my Metro councilman. I've met with another Metro councilman about this. I've also met with multiple of the staff of Mayor Fisher. And basically, there's support there, but they don't see any way to make this happen, and they're not fighters for this. So while they're not against the principle, I've yet to find one of them that is going to fight for this. We have some obstacles here in the state that you know, our budget is really tight. This pandemic's making it even worse. This is a very expensive project, but it's going to pay off long term because we don't want to get left behind. These cities that are going to do municipal broadband are not going to left behind. That's where all the young professionals are going to go. That's where their young professionals are going to stay. But any of these cities that don't enact this, you know, we're going to be left behind in the future. We don't want to do that. We need to be proactive. So we need the Metro Council to set a term, 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, figure out what it's going to cost, which they've done this study. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to see it. I've tried to find it, but I've been told the study's been done. They know what the cost amount is. Set a target date, bring that money in. Now, we need to talk about how to do that. That's a whole nother conversation for another time, not right now. Bring that money in and make this happen. This is an investment in the community. This is an investment in the future, and it's just a must. So, you know, we got to bring awareness to this. Talk to your friends and family, and make sure they know. If somebody doesn't know about net neutrality, show them this video, please, and get them on the bandwagon for net neutrality. Municipal broadband, it's a must. Watch the Ron Placone playlist. This is such an important topic, people. If you want Medicare for all, Green New Deal, livable wages, paid FMLA, a different foreign policy, whatever it is that you want, we're not going to make those things happen in the current system. So we have to lay that foundation. We've got to secure elections. We've got to have net neutrality. And if we can do that, we work on our media. And if we can do all of that, we're golden. We'll make the other things happen. But we're not going to make those other things happen without the foundation. We're not going to put a roof on the house if we don't have a foundation. We can't put in the windows. Can't put up the siding. It's just how it is. So
you're saying that net neutrality is an important part of having a media that works for us.
Absolutely, it's a must.
A media that's not bought.
It's a must. If we have propaganda for legacy media and we lose net neutrality permanently, in 10 years and 20 years, we're not going to have a clue what's going on. We're not going to know left from right. I can give an example of that, not necessarily net neutrality related because it's further back in history, but Tiananmen Square in China. That was a big thing. I remember it from the 80s. If you don't know about it, I'm not going to explain it right now. Go look it up, Tiananmen Square. But I saw a few years ago, I saw a video where they interviewed some regular Chinese folks about Tiananmen Square, and they'd never heard of it. Never heard of it. They had no idea what it was, no reaction to it, just weren't aware because of the censorship there in the country. So that's what we're going to be in 10, 20 years without net neutrality. We're just not going to know about these things. You know, any kind of our heroes in history that fought for stuff, we're not going to know about them. All the movements, we're not going to know about them. We barely know about them now. So we cannot wait on this. Now is the time while we have these lawsuits going. If we lose these lawsuits and we don't fight back, we're done with that. So critical issue and not a talked about issue. And you're not going to hear it on the mainstream media because, for example, MSNBC is owned by Comcast. Comcast is a major donor to politicians to end net neutrality. Same with Verizon. Ajit Pai, who's the head of the FCC, he's a former Verizon lobbyist. That was his job, to get rid of net neutrality. And then they put him in a job to get rid of net neutrality. And that's what he did right away. So we're not going to hear from these media conglomerates about this because the owners of these conglomerates do not want net neutrality. They're not going to talk about it. You know, Rachel Maddow, Chris Cuomo, and these people know what net neutrality is. You don't hear them talking about it. You're never going to hear them talk about it. So it is up to us. This is a very, very important fight, people. We got to secure the vote. We got to have net neutrality. Then we can work on the media. From there, we're in the fast lane. We're good to go.
And the reason you're not going to hear them talk about it is because it's money versus people. It's the good of the people versus money. It's capital. You know, capital money has a mind of its own, and money is going to flow to where it serves to make more money. And there are too many powerful, rich interests, corporations involved in this to sit idly by while we do something that's good for the people, but not good for their pocketbooks.
Yes. And I just, go ahead.
Let me, so when you said you were going to talk about net neutrality, that triggered it's like, don't get me started. on technology. So can I go into that whole thing?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, when we talk about net neutrality, we're talking about the internet. So the internet is an asset, and how is that asset going to be used and why? The internet, why do we have the internet? It wasn't invented by private businesses. It was invented by the Department of Defense. And all the, take an iPhone or an Android, whichever one you're talking about, every major component in that was developed at taxpayer expense as part of national defense. Don't get me started on why that's the case. It's because you have to scare the crap out of people to get them to spend all this money on defense. You have to fool people into spending money on defense, but then the technology comes out of it. So the major components of an iPhone include the microchip. It includes the telecommunications infrastructure. It includes the video technology, the sound technology, and so every major component of it was developed. I've heard that the microchip was developed to guide nuclear missiles, but it was developed at taxpayer expense. So why should the taxpayers not have the benefit of that? Do you know what I'm saying?
Right. It's just like, when a medicine is developed at taxpayer expense, and then a big pharma company makes a whole lot of money off that taxpayer research.
Right. So this
Same
is
concept.
the major thing. This is one of the main things I've learned from Noam Chomsky. I call it upwards wealth redistribution. We hear about wealth redistribution as if, conservatives tend to think that wealth redistribution is a bad thing. And the reason they think wealth redistribution is a bad thing is because they don't realize that we are systematically and on a large scale redistributing wealth upwards. So the people that have the most money they benefit from having these defense stocks like Boeing and Bechtel and Halliburton, and they benefit from having the tech stocks. I mean the defense stocks, they benefit from having the tech stocks like Facebook and Google and Apple. And those companies make so much money because the relevant technology that the government has, the taxpayers, your parents, grandparents, great grandparents, all paid tax money for decades to the government so that the government could take it and invest that money in technology that was not usable, let alone marketable, for decades. And then a few people, instead of the people benefiting from that, a few, like the 1% of the 1%, the hundredth of 1% benefit the most from that. And it's a systematic redistribution from the taxpayer to Wall Street. And that's why the people, for one thing, should have royalties, but there should be a limit on how big Facebook can grow, because Facebook is a result of government-funded technology. And there should be a limit on how rich people should be, because show me a billionaire and I'll show you somebody who is rich because of, partly because of taxpayer funded investment in technology. Part of it is because taxpayer funded defense that allows them to own stock in companies that go all over the world, raping the natural resources and paying people 10, 20 cents an hour to do their work. And so that's upwards wealth redistribution. And another thing that should happen, so the public should be able to control the technology. So the users of Facebook should be able to have a union that has power versus Facebook, so that if there's things about Facebook that needs to be fixed, Facebook has to do it. For that matter, Facebook should be a utility. When you get big enough, it's like, it should be a law that says when you get to be a billion dollar company, you've had your fun. Now it belongs to the people. It either belongs to the people through government control, or it belongs to the people through distributing the dividends to the people on an equitable basis. But Facebook should be a utility. You get that big, and anything that's a monopoly like that, there's no reason why that should be in the control of private hands. And
I was
Google,
getting
there's
ready
no
to
reason.
ask you about that too.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
Because Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, those are the modern day town squares. So,
Right.
public utility, nationalize it, however you want to put it, that's where it should be, because that's literally the town square now.
Exactly. And, so it was developed at taxpayer expense. Plus, Mark Zuckerberg or Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates, oh, don't get me started on Bill Gates. He's pure evil. I mean, what he's doing with agriculture alone is pure evil. Agriculture and healthcare, he's just pure evil. And
We could maybe do a segment on him in the future. Yeah.
yeah, so he made his money using technology that was developed at taxpayer expense. There's no reason for one person to have that much power. There's no reason for Microsoft Word to not be public domain. There's no reason for all of the relevant technology related to Facebook and Google to not be public domain, because it was developed at taxpayer. Now, if there's a weapon or something, and we don't need all these weapons anyway, but if it's possible that there is technology that maybe shouldn't be public domain because it's dangerous, but there's not very much of that. And we need to stop developing dangerous technologies to begin with.
Yes.
So don't get me started. Another thing, yeah, Apple should be a worker self-directed enterprise. Facebook should be a worker self-directed enterprise. In other words, a co-op. It should be governed by the employees. And the way that works is that every employee has two roles. You have your role as, for that matter, UPS should be, and FedEx. So you have your role as employee, and then you also have your role as you're either on the board of directors or you have a vote in who gets to be on the board of directors. That is a worker self-directed enterprise. And there's no reason that the business enterprises that we have are, they're hierarchical. They're subject to the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. If you bring the capital, you call the shots. If you bring the capital, you reap the profits. So there's no reason for it to be that way. We should have worker self-directed enterprises at least as an option, but there's no reason for the fruits and the benefits of Apple to be shared by a few people. It should be equitable. And here's the thing. Too much money and too few. I said this last week. If you heard this before, don't stop me because I enjoy talking about it. But but if you have too much money and too few hands is dangerous. Too much money and too few hands is the power to declare war. Too much money and power and control and too few hands is the power to buy our government and therefore eliminate democracy at the state level, the federal level, and the local level. Too much money and too few hands is the power to eliminate democracy in every other little country in the world. Too much money and too few hands is the power to trash the environment. Too much money and too few hands is the power to eliminate labor unions. It's the power to eliminate safety and health regulations. It's the power to enact trade deals like NAFTA and the World Trade Organization and the US-China Permanent Normal Trade Relations. It's the power to control our frickin' lives. In fact, one of my favorite new people that I've been listening to a lot is Vandana Shiva, and she says, Bill Gates is a dictator. I mean, that's what he is. He's a dictator. He has that much power, and it's just, the U.S. is supposed to be founded on the principle of you don't give too much power to too few people. The storybook, the fairy tale we're told in school is that we had a king. There was a king and we rebelled against the king because nobody should be, actually we were rebelling against Parliament more than the king. And actually we owe a lot more to Britain than we think about, having established some democratic principles and institutions. But where was I going with that? But we're supposed to believe, we're taught, the fairy tale we're taught in school is that we don't like autocracy. We don't like too much power in too few hands, but that's exactly what we've done. We've created a system where we have allowed a system to evolve to where the people that have the power are the ones that have all the money. We acknowledge that money is power, but we don't realize that enough power is the power to eliminate democracy. And that's exactly what we have. We don't have a democracy in any meaningful sense. I'm just saying.
Right on. Right on. Yeah.
So how did I get started on that?
A lot of things there.
Net neutrality and technology.
Yes.
I'm tired of being told that Bezos and Gates and who else? Steve Jobs. Well, Steve Jobs wasn't terribly rich, but I'm tired of being told. Who's the Facebook guy?
Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. I'm tired of being told that these people earned their money. Right. They didn't earn their money. They stole most of it. Show
From
me a
labor.
billionaire and I'll show you lots and lots and lots of stolen money. Show me Wall Street and I'll show you lots and lots and lots of stolen money. There's no reason to give that much. But, for one thing, look at Nike. Can you say slave labor? McDonald's, slave labor. You've got, in the US, you've got prisoners making uniforms for McDonald's, if I'm not mistaken. So if I didn't, then don't sue me. But so it might not be the case, but there are some Fortune 500 companies that are having prison slave labor in the United States of America make their uniforms and do other manufacturing for them. It's freaking stolen money. A hamburger, the true cost of a hamburger, according to Raj Patel, is $200. $5 hamburger costs $200 if you take into account the true costs. These big corporations, if you look at the work of David C. Corton, who's my new favorite author, he wrote When Corporations Rule the World, and he wrote another couple of books. One of them is Change the Story, Change the Future. But he talks about how the bigger corporation, it's another thing I want to say about Mayday, but the bigger corporation, the bigger the corporation, the more skilled they are at shifting the costs onto the public. They don't make all that money. It's stolen money. It's like shifting the cost. $5 hamburger, you're talking about, clearing land for cattle, clearing land for the soybean and the corns that they eat. You're talking about killing pollinators, killing all the habitat for bees, butterflies, and birds. You're talking about ruining the water. These companies not only did not earn their money, the true cost of what they're doing is some multiple of their total revenue. If people knew that, if people knew that, it would be a different world, because we would be much more likely to rebel, to not cooperate, to call BS when MSNBC says ridiculous things, or Fox News says ridiculous things, or the New York Times says ridiculous things. We would be much more. So that's what I would like for people to know. I would like for people to know some of the basics of freedom, of control, of money, of power, of military might, some of the basics of what are our options in terms of business organizations. There are alternatives. The most dangerous thing, one of the most dangerous things, is that we're taught that there is no alternative. Like Margaret Thatcher said, there is no alternative to this neoliberal system that we have. Well, there are lots of alternatives. We're just never taught.
If there's not a good one, then we need to create one. But regardless, there will never be an alternative if we don't try.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'd like for our listeners to getting back to the our heroes in the podcasting world. I mean, they're just regular people who got in front of a camera. And some of them are professionals like Jimmy Dore, Lee Camp, or professional comedians. but I just believe that there's so much potential and possibility in just regular people getting in front of a camera and talking, stepping up to the microphone, stop overanalyzing what you're going to do, and just step up. And some people out there saying they're going to something else. I'm tired of hearing Hart Hagen rant and rave, but we have to take control of what we learn and what we teach.
Yes. Citizen media, independent media has to be the future.
Mm-hmm. It does. And if we have things like our universal basic income and rent controls, then we have time to do this stuff instead of being a slave to a job.
Yes. How nice would it for this to be the job?
Yeah. Hey, did you want to do viewer mail?
Yeah, we can do that. Got another great entry today. This one came from regular viewer by the name of Tony. Thanks so much, Tony, for watching, and thank you for your mail. Tony states, my personal 2 cents on what I wish I could hear more about, and maybe this can tie into the Democratic lack thereof primary, or perhaps Biden's sexual assault charges, is the villainy of voting third party. If we never change the stigma around third party candidates and make them a viable option, I don't think we can ever have change, because both parties are willing to throw themselves under the bus to stop true political fracturing from even within the plutocracy. Any talk on it is good, because I refuse to feel bad when Trump wins and I vote third party because the DNC ripped the only good candidate away for the second time. So thanks for that comment, Tony. Do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
Well, this gets to the issue of, here's one thing I was thinking about this. So this gets to the issue of, you have two parties. Now, if we had two cereals to choose from, we would realize that that's not much of a choice. If we had only two cars to choose from, that'd be not much of a choice. Name anything else in the world, and if you have only two choices, then you realize that's not much of a choice. But this is supposed to be the way to do it. And I know otherwise intelligent people, especially, I hope my good friends are not listening, but otherwise intelligent people who are Democrats, who think that the Democratic Party is the resistance. It's just not the case. But
Not at all.
So anyway, what are your thoughts on that, on what he said?
Before I get in that, just to address that cereal comment, don't you know that our cereal aisle is like the #1 U.S. accomplishment? I mean, go to another country. Where else can you find 500 cereals in an aisle? I mean,
And what
we're
else
just
matters?
killing the cereal stuff. I mean,
I know.
people complain about, wages and rent and net neutrality and these things, but we have cereal, people. We have cereal. So
Everyone should want 5 different kinds of Captain Crunch. I mean,
that's
everybody
it.
should want that. Or how many different kinds of Oreos have they come up with? I mean, that's what everybody
Not
should
enough.
aspire to.
Not enough yet. We need like a dozen more. But yeah, third party. So let me say that I'm a lifelong Democrat since I can remember, but I was never really felt like a pro-Democrat. I was always kind of like an anti-Republican, anti-right wing kind of thing, and the Democrats are how you fought that. What I was told and what I thought for the longest time. I can say that after this primary, if assuming it's allowed to happen, after this primary, I'm going to cast my vote for Bernie, and then I'm going to come home and I'm going to leave the party after 25 plus years because I'm done. There are too many, all the primaries are rigged against the grassroots candidates, against the people who aren't the establishment pick to win that race. And the party has gone so far right, it doesn't represent me at all. I don't really know what I agree with the party on anymore. Even if they say something that I might agree with, they don't actually fight for it anyways. So, they're just not on my side. I guess, no, I don't know. I don't know what, you can maybe say pro-choice, but then again, now they're starting to support some anti-choice Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So even that isn't even solid anymore, but I can't do it. I'm not going to feel bad about my vote. I'm not going to be held hostage to go in a booth and look at two candidates that are absolutely horrible, whose candidates are the opposite of what I work for, and think I'm going to vote for one of these things. No, I'm not. I've made the decision, and I made this a couple years ago, and it's only been strengthened by how bad the primaries were this year, just just at a ridiculous level. But I'm only going to vote for something. I'm only going to vote for a grassroots candidate. If they take big money, I'm not going to consider you. I don't care what the letter is beside your name. It's not happening. You have to be grassroots. If there's more than one grassroots candidate, which I haven't been fortunate enough to have that election yet, but if that choice ever hits my plate, then we'll get into the policy more. Obviously, I want progressive type people over maybe a more libertarian centered type of candidate. But we don't really have that problem right now of having to choose between grassroots candidates. The bottom line is you can't have people that are bought out from the beginning. Even if you disagree with somebody, if they're not bought, you can have a discussion with them and maybe you can change their mind. But when they're bought out, you might change their mind and it doesn't matter because they're paid to do what they're paid to do, regardless of if they agree with you or not, which they probably don't to begin with, because they really don't stand for anything. That's why they're taking the money and that's why they're corrupt. They don't stand. They don't care. The issues don't mean anything to them. They will promote any issue that puts dollars in their pocket. They will be against any issue that puts dollars in their pocket as far as being against it.
Got about another minute.
So third party is what we have to do. Bernie should have started one 4 years ago. Yes, the system is rigged against it. Yes, we have to do it anyways. We have to. That you cannot overtake either party. And if somebody with that intent actually gets elected, which is extremely difficult to do, they're going to be absorbed into the party, just like we've watched with the squad, just like we've watched happen to Bernie, just like what we watched happen to Tulsi. So don't feel bad. Vote your conscience. It's better to vote for what you want and not get it than to vote for what you don't want and actually get it.
Eugene V. Debs, that's awesome. We're going to have to end it there, Rolf. Thank you so much for joining me.
All right. Thank you, Hart.
And to our listeners, join us again soon. Thanks for listening.